Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Nina Cedeno. I'm the Senior Immigration Policy Analyst with the Latino Policy Forum. At the Latino Policy Forum, we believe that every child and family deserves to feel welcome, safe, and valued regardless of their actual and perceived immigration status. Unfortunately, anti-immigration policies, rhetoric, and uncertainty are increasingly impacting the overall well-being of families across Illinois. The purpose of this workshop is to empower you with the tools and resources to support yourself, your loved ones, and your community. And I'm going to pass it to my co-presenter, Brian.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here, listening in. My name is Brian Herrera. I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at the Latino Policy Forum, and my work is to work with families, provide resources, information, and tools to help families thrive here in the state of Illinois.
Thank you, Anna. You can move to the next slide, next couple slides. Great. So just a little bit about who we are. The Latino Policy Forum is a statewide nonprofit policy and advocacy organization in the state of Illinois that works across policy areas such as housing, education, immigration, and leadership to empower Latino communities. Through advocacy and analysis, the forum builds a foundation for equity, justice, and economic prosperity for the Latino community. You can go to the next slide. And I'm going to pass it to Brian.
Thank you, Nina. Wanted to start off by grounding ourselves. Today's topic is a very, controversial topic. So the shifting political climate can create uncertainty, stress, and anxiety among many immigrant and mixed status families. So we kind of wanted to highlight how uncertainty in our communities leads to fear, and that fear can lead to isolation. And we hope that for today's purposes is our goal is to provide information, resources, and strategies to school leaders, community leaders, and organizations as you serve as trusted messengers for your community. And we love to have a quote as a reminder that an informed community is an empowered community. And today's presentation will not be legal advice, will not be know your rights. If you need those things, please seek out a legal professional, and the same for mental health. If you notice that you or your loved one needs additional assistance, please look out for a professional that can assist with that. Thank you.
Okay, so just an overview of the agenda. We're going to start with an overview of the impacted communities. So who can be impacted by immigration action? So everything that's going on in today's political climate. We will do a quick review of local, state, and federal protections as it pertains to the immigrant community, an introduction to safety planning. So for both nonprofit centers, schools, and briefly family safety planning, an overview of well-being and some self-care strategies, as well as key messages, takeaways, and a resource guide that we will share with you at the end. So really wanting to, again, start us off on how different roles empower immigrant families. So we know that there are many agencies, organizations in the state of Illinois that are working to and protect and empower immigrant families. And so we all have a role to play, right? I think is what I want to start us off with. So our state and local governments, right? So the governor's office, various state agencies like the Illinois Department of Human Rights, Human Services, the Board of Education, and such, right, are responsible for providing timely and culturally, linguistically responsive resources on websites such as Illinois Cares for Kids, right, on what to do in situations when, for example, when there's ICE enforcement, how to protect families and children in those situations. Also, the Illinois General Assembly, so in Springfield, and city councils here in the state of Chicago or in other parts of the state can propose and pass legislation or ordinances to further strengthen protections for immigrant families or in ensuring additional safeguards in place as federal policies evolve. Right. And so next we have advocates and community-based organizations or CBOs. So those organizations are responsible for providing information and protections on protections and resources that are available to the community. So resources on safety planning in the event of ICE presence in the community or around a school at your organization, informing the community about changes to existing laws and protections, which is something that we do at the Latino Policy Forum. Um, we also know that there are organizations that are providing specific know your rights trainings, right? Again, what to do in very specific situations of ICE enforcement, what to do, how to exercise your legal and constitutional rights, and then what to do when, again, when you spot ICE enforcement and how to call the ICER hotline. And then also, we know that organizations that are already providing wraparound support for immigrant families and families in the community in general and linking them to resources like mental health, rental assistance, and such. And then finally, we know that there are a number of organizations out there that have the capacity to provide direct legal services to families around guardianship, asylum, DACA renewal, which we know is a growing need in the community at this moment, as well as deportation defense and family reunification. So just really wanted to lay the groundwork of how all of these organizations fit. Okay, now moving on to an overview of impacted communities. So who can potentially be impacted by immigration enforcement and immigration actions at the federal level. So again, this is a very broad overview. So some data. So nationally, there are over 73.5 million children. So children between the ages of 0 and 18 in the US, and over a quarter of them live with at least one foreign-born or immigrant parent. And more than 4 million of these children have at least one undocumented parent. And close to 90% of those children are US citizens. So really, when we're talking about mass deportations and we're talking about separating families, right? Families of mixed statuses. So mixed status family is a household in which some family members are U.S. citizens or have another permanent residence or green card holders, while others may be undocumented or have different immigration statuses or temporary statuses. So, for example, roughly 300,000 U.S. born children have at least one parent who is a DACA recipient. So, someone who has DACA is someone who is able to live and work in the United States for uh, a period of time, right? And so, again, in Illinois, we see very similar trends of mixed status families where undocumented immigrants make up less than 4% of the state's total population, and close to 200,000 US children live with at least one undocumented parent. So, again, when we're talking about what we're seeing at the federal level, um, these immigration actions impact entire family units. So, not just the person or immigrant in question, right? But we're talking about separating parents from their children, individuals from their communities, business owners from their businesses, right? And so just really wanting to highlight that these have very familial and communal impacts as well. And so I want to highlight a study that the Urban Institute just recently released that found that in the wake of the 2024 election, 29% of all immigrant families and 60% in mixed status families, so again, families that have at least one undocumented family member, expressed worry or some or extreme worry about doing essential activities in their communities, such as driving a car, going to work, or attending religious services because they did not want to draw attention to their or their family members' immigration status. Again, when we have this fear or chilling effect of individuals not wanting to engage in their community, that can have very serious impacts on the individual, the family, and the community as a whole. We can go to the next slide. Thank you, Anna. And so just really wanting to highlight briefly for those who are working in schools or in centers that work specifically with English learners. While not all children of immigrants are English learners, and not all English learners are from immigrant families, many English learners in the state of Illinois come from mixed status families. So really wanting to highlight the overlap here. and highlighting that the state of Illinois is increasingly diverse, right? So 1 in 4 children, again, have at least one immigrant parent. 1 in 4 children also speak a language other than English in the home. And approximately 12% of students in Illinois identify as English learners. And Chicago Public Schools specifically serves as the largest number of English learners in Illinois. Again, so that's not to say that all English learners are immigrants and vice versa, but how are our policies in Illinois reflecting these very growing and diverse needs? And how are immigration policies, negative and anti-immigrant rhetoric impacting the growing and diverse needs of our student population? So really wanting to keep that in mind as well. Thank you, Anna. So we know this is something that we study a lot at the Latino Policy Forum and firmly believe that when children are healthy, they are more likely to succeed in school and in life. But when anti-immigrant rhetoric and harsh immigration policies exist, that can have a compounding and cumulative impact on children and their development. For example, prolonged exposure to fear, anxiety, and uncertainty over time can undermine a child's brain development, altering their memory, learning, and ability to manage their emotions, leading to more serious long-term mental health challenges, such as PTSD. And that was recently supported in a study by the Society for Research and Child Development that explains how anti-immigration policies such as deportations and detention can pose serious risks to children across legal statuses. So even, again, children who have citizenship status can also experience these stressors. So again, these stressors can lead to reduced access to social services, can create more stress on parents and educators when children are not showing up to school. And then again, long-term negative effects. And so acknowledging the impact on young children is really critical as we work to support children and families during these very uncertain and difficult times. So moving on to uh, a topic that hopefully is a little bit more empowering for folks is to know that Illinois is one of the most protective states in the nation for immigrants. And so now we're going to focus on some of the federal, state, and local protections that exist for mixed status families and immigrants in Illinois. So now we're going to start with the Illinois Trust Act, and I'm sure that many have heard about the Trust Act before. And so just really want to preface that this is by no means an exhaustive list of the protections that exist, but we could spend all day talking about that. But the Illinois Trust Act, just to remind ourselves, prohibits law enforcement from stopping, searching, or arresting someone solely based on their immigration or citizenship status. It also prohibits law enforcement from detaining someone just because of a request by ICE or without a warrant signed by a judge, right? So it's, severely limits state and local law enforcement from participating in federal immigration enforcement. And this is, again, in order to create trust between immigration communities and local law enforcement. So there are great benefits to doing this. Next, we have the Illinois Voices Act, which provides immigrants who have experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, and other crimes, and wish to cooperate with law enforcement, the resources they need to apply for specific humanitarian visas, such as a U or T visa. For example, so this requires that a certifying agency and the Chicago Police Department or any local police department to complete the certification in a truthful and timely manner. Again, so making it easier on individuals who experience these specific crimes, right, and are cooperative to apply for the protection that they need. Next is the Illinois Way Forward Act, which strengthens the Trust and Voices Act, and again clarifies that local law enforcement should not be collaborating with ICE on civil immigration enforcement, or the very specific circumstances in which they could. And it also prohibits state or local law enforcement from signing contracts with the federal government to detain immigrants. So this law effectively ended private detention in the state of Illinois for immigration. So that's very important. And then it also authorized the Attorney General, the Illinois Attorney General, to conduct investigations into violations of the Trust Act. So again, ensuring that there's accountability in place. The Chicago Welcoming City Ordinance, again, for those who live in Chicago, in line with the Trust Act and state law, also says that CPD cannot stop, arrest, or detain someone solely based on their status or because ICE asked them to, unless there's a warrant signed by a judge. It also guarantees that city services are available to all Chicago residents, regardless of their status. And then we also have, excuse me, the Illinois Human Rights Act, which again prohibits discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodation, education, um, based on a number of factors, right? Like such as immigration status, sources of income, race, national origin. Excuse me. And then the Illinois Tenant Protection Act, which prohibits a landlord from disclosing or threatening to disclose or attempting to evict someone based on their status. So this one was recently enforced in the news, you may have heard. So we'll move on to student protections. And at this point, I'm going to pass it to Brian.
Thank you, Nina. Just to emphasize, Illinois is one of the most active and safest states to live in for immigrants. And these are the ones I'm going to be talking about is also federal. So these affect not only Illinois, but other states as well. We're going to start off by talking about FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy. So this is a federal law that protects student education records and family information. And FERPA supersedes state law and is applicable to schools and post-secondary institutions. Something to keep in mind when it comes to post-secondary institutions, there would be a need for a FERPA waiver for parents and families to have access to students' information. But from K through 12, the parents have the rights to their child's information. But going on to post-secondary, going on to college, the students have the rights to their records and their information. So just to keep in mind that their educational records and family information is protected. And then there's the McKinney-Veno bill that it's a federal law that also offers protections for children in temporary living situations. And then lastly, Plyer versus Doe, which affirms that all children, regardless of immigration status, have a constitutional right to a free public education. So these are all important. Keep in mind that we have a right to our records, our educational records and family information, and we have the right to receive an education despite our living situations and despite our immigration status.
And just want to add here real quick that, we know that there's a growing concern around data and privacy and things of that nature. But again, really want to emphasize that we have these in place and there may be attempts to undo some of this, but if that were the case, undoing these federal laws and things that are already in place could take years, right? So just
Mhm.
really want to kind of reassure individuals that there are advocates out there that are fighting to protect existing laws and strengthen laws at the state level as well.
Thank you, Nina. And then just to kind of continue on with Plyer versus Doe, this is a long-standing protection against immigration enforcement in K through 12 public educational settings. So in Plyer versus Doe, a case was brought by Maldev. The Supreme Court made access to a free public education a constitutional right, regardless of immigration status. So this is very important for families to keep in mind and to also feel safe that regardless of their status, they have the constitutional right to a free public education. And so, if you learn, here are just some facts on this page. Please keep these in mind. And if you learn about any immigration enforcement activity at a school, please make sure to contact Maldev. There's a email link right here, info@maldev.org. And I believe Nina has access to this and will be able to send it out if anybody has a need for it. Um, but yeah, just keep these in mind. And then we're going to go into safety planning. It's also very important for families to be prepared in case of an emergency to have a family safety plan. And we're going to kind of go over that shortly. So developing a safety plan for your center, have a designated staff for communications, identify someone who is authorized to speak with authorities, and then have confidential information management. Have guidelines for storing and releasing private data about parents, children, and staff. So have this confidential information center or documents, data, whatever it is, have it stored and available in case of an emergency. And then have urgent communication protocols, procedures for notifying staff, notifying parents about urgent information or situations. And then facility access, have rules for authorized staff and parents to access the center, whether you're keeping it locked, whether you're having a doorbell, have a way of protection and access for your facility, for the staff, and for the children. And then have clear expectations and guidelines for visitors. So make sure that that is communicated well through your communications protocols, and then also have an emergency contact list. Establish and maintain an up-to-date list of emergency contacts. So ensuring all policies comply with local, state, and federal laws, and assess whether additional changes are needed to better protect your facility and the personal data of enrolled families.
If I can just add one more thing here, we know that there's with the rescinding of the protecting sensitive locations memo that I'm sure many of you are familiar with by now. There's a growing concern of, what do we do, right? In these situations if in spaces that are no longer protected, so schools, hospitals, churches, things of that nature. So again, this does not mean that you don't have rights. This does not mean that you can't designate certain spaces to be private, things of that nature. So I encourage you to visit the this guide from the Center for Law and Social Policy here at the bottom. They recently updated this guide for safe spaces such as those that I just listed. So I encourage you to look at that as well.
Thank you, Nina. And then when it comes to having a family safety plan in your facility and when talking to your parents, the families, it's very important to have that family safety plan and what is the goal, whether it's in case of an emergency, whether it is reunifying with the family or finding continuity of care in the United States. It's very important to have a preferred end goal in mind for your plan. And so when it comes to reunification, it is intended use of the information included in your family safety plan is to support reunifying children with separated parents. And so these plans have an intended goal that will have additional planning around travel plans, documentation, and also having a budget and having an emergency fund to help with the reunification in case that were the situation. And then there's a continuity of care in the United States, which is intended use of the information included in your family safety plan is to support the guardian to support continuity of care in the United States without plans for family reunification. So having a guardian to take care of the children would be this end goal. And so, what are the elements of a family safety plan? We can start, we broke it down into four pieces. The first would be family information. And I'm gonna quickly go over these. And in the next few slides, we're gonna look at what would those documents need, what will be necessary. But let's start off with the first piece, family information. We need to create a detailed list of family information for each member of the family. Then we would need important documents that include IDs, documents that could include addresses, bank statements, information from your home country in case of reunification, understand like where would be the relocation, where would be a home for many families. So have these information available and then talk about guardianship. Ensure that you create an exhaustive list of close and trusted individuals who are able to have agreed to take guardianship. This is very important to also consider. And then lastly, the last piece is health and medical information. medical and physician information. And then on these next few slides, we're gonna look at a detailed list. Again, this is something that can be sent over. We also have a tool, we mentioned a toolkit that has access to many organizations that can help with this planning as well. And as mentioned, for family information, having documents that have your name, date of birth, phone numbers, school address, work address, those phone numbers, and for the children, having the detailed family information of the children as well. What school are they attending? Are they involved? Are they in after school programs? And then other important documents, birth certificates, passports, licenses, A numbers, social security numbers, all of this will be part and considered in the important documents, which is one of the elements for family safety plan. Let's go on to the next one. So then the last two elements were health and medical information. This can include history of health of the family, including medications, allergies, prescriptions, insurance, and coverage information, and then guardianship. This one is a bit more sensitive. For this, we'd recommend consulting with an attorney. Speaking with an attorney around your family's guardianship planning and the required documents that should be in your plan. And so an example of that document could be a notarized power of attorney. And so those key takeaways from those plannings is number one, to determine a goal for the family safety plan. Number two is to display your family safety plan in a visible location for you and your family. And with that, we would recommend keeping a binder, one that stands out with all those materials, all those documents. And then lastly, keep your family and extended network up to date with your plan and any changes. And then we know that, as we mentioned in the beginning, when we feel uncertain, when we feel fear, when we feel all these anxious thoughts, it can lead to isolation. It can lead to not speaking up, not being involved, not participating. That can affect our children. That can affect families because they're not showing up to work and their children are not focusing. They're not concentrating because they're worried that their parent might not pick them up or they might not be home when they get there. So it's very important for us to support not only the social and emotional well-being of our children, but for ourselves as well. So let's dive into that a bit. So when it comes to mental health and well-being, it's very important to understand what that consists of. It includes our emotional well-being, psychological well-being, social well-being. So this can all affect how we think, how we feel, and how we act. And as we mentioned earlier, when we feel those thoughts of anxiousness, it makes us feel bad, it makes us feel sad, it makes us lose appetite, it makes us lose sleep. So what does that do? It affects our productivity, it affects how we work, it affects how we concentrate, it affects how we feel and the relationships among us. And we wanted to provide some data. Anxiety and stress disorders are the most reported in the United States. So this is very important to keep in mind and to recognize those signs as well to be able to support. So when talking about recognizing those signs, we can look at the physical symptoms of fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping, stomach problems, appetite problems. And then there's the emotional. There's the noticing irrit I can't say the word right now, but when our children are very irritated or when they're very sad or they feel hopeless, emotional numbness, that could be sign. And then there's behavioral symptoms, and these are the ones that we can witness with our own eyes, as well as the physical ones. But notice the behavior, notice the patterns that are changing. Are they withdrawing from social activities? Are they having difficult concentrating? Are their grades dropping, or are they not participating in activities at the centers? Are they not eating? So it's very important to keep in mind. And also important to understand the symptoms that occur where Children might be acting out, they might be regressing in behavior or having difficulty focusing. And so one of my favorite, conversations to have with families is finding ways to manage stress because no matter what, as human beings, even animals, stress is going to be part of our normal. And so it's not how to get rid of it, but it's how to manage it, how to respond to it. And one of the best ways, few of the best ways are here, and starting off with sleep. Getting enough rest, getting enough sleep can really help you and your body. And then nutrition, choosing foods that make you feel happy and boost your mood, your energy. And then I try my best to eat an apple. They say, apple a day keeps the doctor away. But eating foods that can really help us, and let's try to avoid a lot of foods that could harm us in the long run. So set aside time for activities that relax you and recharge you. Set aside to read, to relax, to even if you watch a show, like let's not binge watch, but maybe get an episode in and then taking care of your mind and spirit. We know that negative thoughts raise cortisol levels, which make you feel anxious and depressed. So having those positive thoughts help release dopamine and serotonin, which help you feel better. So I always recommend watching comedies, watching funny shows because that can also help boost your dopamine and serotonin. And having a support system, reaching out to trusted family members and friends and community groups is very important because if you're surrounded by negativity, that's also going to affect how you feel and how you act. So surround yourself by positivity so that can positively impact how you feel and how you act. And then creating a safe space, a space that encourages expression of emotions, expression of thoughts that can provide reassurance so our children can feel loved and heard. And then focusing on routine. Routines are very important to keep us focused, to keep us away from feeling lost, feeling not knowing what to do next. Routines can be very important for our families and for ourselves. And then lastly, breathing exercises. One of the ones that I always recommend families is to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then exhale for 4 seconds. And then another one, and this one's encouraged for those that are working with families, is to separate what you can and what you cannot control, the power of separation. Remember that we can't really control certain policies. We can definitely be involved and influence, and that's the part where we can't control of what are we spending our energy on. Let's not try to focus on what we can't control, on people's actions, the past, external circumstances. It's better to focus on our efforts, our actions, who we engage with, who's in our circle, and then our reactions, how we respond to negativity. And that's why the previous slide showed a lot of ways to really improve our mood and surround ourselves and to take care of ourselves as well. And then, Nina, do you want to take this
Yeah,
slide?
I can take the last
Okay.
couple. So thank you for all that, Brian. It's really important to remember to take care of ourselves. As we work with families, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? I think is the phrase. So thank you for that reminder. So just wanting to end with some key messages, right? So just to kind of remind ourselves what we talked about. So for school leaders in particular, just adopting district policy that outlines, again, procedures. So we know that there are many schools that have already received guidance either from the Illinois State Board or from your districts, right, that have clearly explained what to do in the event of immigration enforcement. So, we obviously encourage you to follow that if that's already in place. Um, right? And that may contain, again, what to do in the event of immigration enforcement, how to determine what kind of warrants to comply with, right? What are the differences between the kinds of warrants, things of that nature. So just wanting to be really clear on that. And if you're not clear, right, to seek out that guidance from your districts. Establishing a point person for the school or the district where ICE personnel can be directed to. Again, in the event that they arrive, this person should be familiar with the policy and protocol. This person, again, could be the district's legal counsel, the superintendent, or the chief executive officer. Again, so someone in leadership um, is ideal. So school policy and protocol should be discussed with all staff on campus, right? Because we never know who's going to be there at that point in time. Schools should encourage parents to keep their child's emergency contacts updated and accurate. So that should be something set across the board. Next slide. So for school staff in particular, so communicate with families, affirming the schools and district support for immigrant students and families during these very difficult times. Enroll all students, regardless of immigration or citizenship status, in a timely manner, as this is the law, right? Be intentional with data. Collect only data and records that are required for enrollment purposes and that are necessary for the student to receive educational services in compliance with state and federal law, right? It is encouraged and recommended to not collect any data that is any more data than is necessary. Ensure family and emergency contact information is up to date. Communicate to families about know your rights trainings and resources in the area, and let them know that they may opt out of sharing a directory information. Provide families with a list of community resources to support families in their preparedness plans. Again, what organizations are in the area that provide wraparound support. So something we talked about in the beginning. Next slide. So for providers and community leaders, so again, folks who work at nonprofits or who, provide wraparound support to immigrants or anyone in the community, just to really remind you that you are not alone, right? There are many of us who are experiencing similar stress and challenges. Plan and share. I think the best thing is to be informed and to be as prepared as possible. So creating a safety plan for your center. As I mentioned earlier, designating certain areas of your center that are private, right? Outlining, so that might be a procedure that you outline for your staff and resources to keep center and staff safe, like how to identify different types of warrants, as we mentioned earlier. Seeking support, so knowing when to seek professional help and community resources is incredibly important. Staying empowered, right? Taking control of your mental health, your well-being, can also foster resilience and strength during difficult times. So really understanding that fear and isolation, these are incredibly real feelings, but they can also be temporary, right? So there's also room to really foster resilience and strength even during these times. And then staying informed, not overwhelmed, accessing, excuse me, reliable information about immigration policies. So certainly that is something that we're trying to do at the forum, is to only disseminate and share information that is verified. Limiting exposure to news that increases anxiety. It's certainly easier said than done, but incredibly important. And then the next slide, Anna. Last but not least. So just really wanting to remind folks that the forum has compiled a safe and healthy living resource guide for immigrant families, providers, and advocates that can be accessed on our website or via this QR code. Again, we want to thank you all for your time, and please reach out to us with any questions. Thank you.